storm clouds rolling across the northwest, threatening to burst, but mostly waiting until they reach the coast. There has been some rain in the last fortnight, but not enough to break the drought, which some farmers say is the worst ever. 2 months ago, NBN Television launched a drought appeal. To date, more than $55,000 has been donated and $30,000 in hay from farmers in the Griffith area and in the Hunter Valley. All up, $90,000. It sounds a lot of money, and it is. It will keep alive 60,000 sheep for the next month. These men and women from farming groups, service clubs and local councils are deciding how best to distribute that hay and money. They're sifting through applications from more than 100 farmers desperate for assistance.
It'll be a massive help to a lot of people.
And while the committee pause over the applications, the hay rolls in. Truckloads kindly given by farmers in the southwest of the state and in the Hunter. At Warialda, about 190 kilometres north of Tamworth, it's handed out, and within hours, it's feed for stock. Garth Skinner owns a property north of Warialda, one of the areas hardest hit by the drought. The land is black and barren, and his mob of 1,200 sheep are hand-fed.
There's virtually no surface feed at all. What little feed there is no benefit, no value, food value to the sheep, and so the only feed they're getting is what we're giving them.
Through the appeal, Garth has received 189 bales of Hunter hay.
The funds are virtually non-existent these days in the bush, and when you're not sure much how much longer you're going to have to feed for, anything like this is just a godsend.
Up the road, Don Stevenson is also receiving assistance from the drought appeal. He too was hand-feeding. Last week the grain ran out. The sheep are now grazing on what little grass the rain has encouraged, but if the weather turns cold, the rain will have been for nothing.
If it rains again, it'll be really good, and if it stays warm. Once it turns cold, well, it'll stop the feed from growing.
Don has received grain worth $550 from the appeal. He says it'll be put to good use.
Mainly for feeding the weak animals, and perhaps carrying the cattle if they run out of feed now before the feed comes good in spring.
Is it good to know that there's people out there who help?
Yes, most appreciative, my word. To know that people do care.
Well, to be quite honest, it hasn't surprised me. Usually Australians pull together when they have to.
More than 600 hunter cleaners were hoping to sweep away the first signs of a sell-off of their services. The mass meeting at Hamilton was linked to Sydney by a television hookup. The government says it will guarantee all workers 12 months employment. After that, the union fears massive retrenchments.
Most of the workers are women. There's 85% of the workforce women. They're self-supporting or they're single parents. So it's going to have quite a devastating effect on those women.
Schools have the largest number of cleaners, but Education Minister Virginia Chadwick supports privatisation.
There is a further $37 million worth of savings that can be made by new and private arrangements, and as a taxpayer as well as a minister, I think we should give it a go.
Under last year's government review, the union says it cut costs by millions, proving its efficiency. For the Hunters' nearly 1,000 miscellaneous workers, today's strike is only the beginning. The union has threatened more industrial action to stop the privatisation of government cleaning services.
It'll be rolling stoppages all around the state. There will be deputations to the politicians all around the various areas. A lot of political action, believe me.
Clearing away bitu bush and lantana with bare hands is hard work. But these 15 Lake Macquarie teenagers went for months without a job, so they say it's good to be working, no matter how tough. And they're hopeful their participation in the 6-month LEAP training program will help them gain more permanent work.
A lot of jobs coming up now for this type of work around the environment, and well, it's good to get outdoors, and it's better than working indoors. Yeah.
Pretty hard. I mean, there's not much around and you just got to be experienced with things, so this might help me here.
The Land Care and Environment Action Program is a federal government initiative launched on Lake Macquarie shores by local MP Bob Brown.
Principally, it's not a matter of the kids getting a set amount of work done. It's a training program for them that'll hopefully in the end they'll get something out of it and eventually get full-time employment out of it.
The environment also benefits from the program. In addition to removing introduced flora and planting native varieties, the participants are unearthing a World War II gun emplacement. To the other side of the lake, and a community group has launched its management concept plan for the controversial Green Point. The plan puts down in writing what the Green Point Action Committee has been wanting for years, a bushland park that fills conservation, recreation and tourism needs.
Obviously haven't thought of everything, but we have just put this together to form a basis, hopefully for perhaps Council will have a look at it and see it as a good basis for a future management plan.
Scott Bevan, NBN News. For 2 years, the payment of site allowances on hunter building projects has been set out in an agreement struck between firms and unions. But the state government said last week that agreement fell outside a building industry code of practice, so local companies would be ruled out of government contracts. According to the Master Builders Association, it was a fear of losing work that has prompted members to unanimously vote to ditch the agreement.
The lack of jobs in Newcastle mean that we've got to do everything that we can to try and create employment for building workers in the area.
They've looked at their pockets and thrown the money out, thrown the agreement out because of money, and that's the basis of it.
The unions say with the Site Agreement Act, investor confidence in large projects such as the Honeysuckle redevelopment will be shaken.
In Newcastle and the Hunter area, developers and people like that have been assured of industrial harmony. Now, obviously, if the agreement goes out the window, there's nothing to take its place, so they'll be very concerned.
I don't think that those outside will see any disharmony at all. It's my firm belief that the building workers in this region will look at what's happened and say that the time has come. There is a case of sharing the cake around, of looking after some of those workers who are unemployed and trying to make sure that those who have currently got employment keep that employment.
Phil Darby says while the Building Trades Group is annoyed the MBA didn't consult it before dropping out of the agreement, no industrial action is planned at this stage. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The atmosphere at Curry Sports Ground was like a Roman Colosseum. The crowd wanted blood, and Glenn Messenger didn't make them wait long. 6 minutes in and he allegedly king-hit Neil Baker in back play. While Baker was out cold, an all-in brawl broke out. Messenger got 10 minutes, Baker looks to have a broken jaw. 10 minutes later, Shane Mackley was marched after allegedly using an elbow that again sparked another all-in brawl. Curry was the first to get their act back together and notched up a very impressive score. By the time first grade ran on to number 2 sports ground, it was chopped to bits. Both packs pushed each other around all afternoon, the only flare coming from the backs that could find some dry ground. The game only won in the dying minutes.
The humble brick and rolling pin have helped put the small township of Stroud on the international map. For the past 33 years, the event has challenged the best of hurlers.
I really don't know what to expect up here today. No idea. I mean, it's not a really aerodynamic implement to be throwing.
6 best throws, and then you're throwing off against the other 3 countries.
Similar events are being held at the Strouds of Canada, America and England. Tomorrow there'll be long-distance phone calls to find out the overall international champions. The record standing at the imperial measure of 145 feet.
Small half-metre waves greeted the competitors this morning, but in the true tradition of 60s surfing fun, competition wasn't on the minds of the board riders. The well-shaped waves meant the longboards measuring up to 3 metres could glide easily across the wind-blown surf. Several categories were contested in the Blast from the Past Malibu Classic. 48 surfers took part in the modern-day version of Malibu riding in the 8-foot freestyle division. Queensland's Peter Strickland won the freestyle event. Gary Cleaves of Tweed Heads won the old Malibu division, executing some classic moves such as drop knee turns and nose riding. Danny Bond of the Central Coast was successful in the Masters, and on the other side of the coin, Darren O'Rafferty of Port Macquarie took out the juniors. In the women's, it was Helen Cross of Port Macquarie. More than 100 surfers took part in the 2-day contest. Organisers say it was a huge success and will hold the Loggerheads Classic again next year. Maybe the Stomp will be back in fashion by then.
To celebrate today's achievement, the club played the White Sox, the first team they came up against 40 years ago. The history of both clubs is fairly well interlinked and makes for good competition when they do match up.
They're an old Mayfield club too. We used to share Denga Park as a home ground. We copped a bit of flack about the state of the ground when we first came up here from them, but yeah, it's a nice rivalry.
The Boomerang's home ground has a history in itself. It was once a slag tip for BHP. Tireless work by club members over the years has turned it into one of the best grounds in the Hunter and an unofficial Newcastle landmark. Lismore brought the scores to 10-all with just 1 minute to play. Spurred on by the try, they were confident they could take the game in extra time, but a dubious field goal ended their hopes. Halfback Doug Carney claims to have touched the ball in flight, but the referee wouldn't listen and still awarded the goal. The game finished seconds later, and the Group 1 boys were filthy with the result. The only consolation coming from supporters who knew they outplayed their opposition in the second half. In the other finals today, Group 4 were too good for Central Coast in the under-15s. The boys from our Tamworth Way were better drilled and finished comfortable winners 16-10. In the prized under-16s game, Newcastle came home strongly in the second half to whitewash Central Coast 22-12. In the under-16s, Newcastle started the game like they were on a mission. For 10 minutes they kept Central Coast pinned on their try line, making them tackle endlessly. Finally, Joshua Grice broke through. When the Coasties finally got the ball, they showed plenty of flair and posted a try very quickly. Scott Wright kept his side in contention with strong running and grass-cutting tackles, but for some reason he was replaced at half-time. At the change, Newcastle had basically free rein, their superior teamwork helping them to a stack of tries. In the under-15, Central Coast suffered another loss, this time to Group 4. Tamworth Way was simply better drilled and lifted to the task. The controversy in the under-14s with a dubious field goal awarded in the last 30 seconds to tie up the win for Group 11. The Group 1 halfback claims to have touched the ball in flight. Terrigal High has already had a taste of big game pressure, playing in the zone final at the Sydney Football Stadium as a curtain raiser to a Winfield Cup game. On Thursday, St Gregory's intends to use its reputation to try and scare the Seaside boys out of the game.
They're probably one of the better known schools for football-wise in the country, and I think it will be tough, it will be against us, but we're going to prove them wrong.
And it will be a battle against the odds. Terrigal doesn't have the sophisticated training facilities of the private schools. The coach makes them rely on teamwork. That knowledge of each other's players spawned a strange move that's resulted in a number of tries.
Yeah, well, they don't know what the people are doing together, and they find it very hard to mark up, and the gap just appears.
Aside from the set moves, the side is flushed with talent. Centre Quinton Smith holds the back line together, while his inside centre Nathan Hurley specialises in the unpredictable pass and can tackle like a forward. At the moment, the team is enjoying celebrity status in the school, and it intends to take along busloads of that support to Redfern Oval on Thursday. Darren Curtis, NBN News.
George Johnston has Paget's disease. It's a bone disorder which in his case caused pain in his hips and his spine. George was recently treated with the drug APD. He says it's given him enormous relief.
I never ever dreamt that during my lifetime that I could feel so good.
Paget's disease usually develops in people over 40. Bones are randomly affected, both thickening and sometimes distorting. While it is a relatively common condition, only a small number of people develop symptoms which can cause disabilities. Dr. Major says the new drug is promising. While it won't heal affected bones, it does stop them further deteriorating.
Previous treatments could only give partial control and needed to be administered continuously. Whereas with this newer treatments, we can induce a remission with just one course of treatment.
While most patients are having the drug, its long-term effects are still being evaluated. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Australian Wheat Board Chairman Clinton Condon expressed these thoughts to delegates attending the New South Wales Farmers Association's annual conference in Sydney today. His speech focused on the flooding in the United States and its effect on the world wheat market. Mr Condon says while the flooding in America's Midwest is disrupting harvest, no major problems are expected.
Every night people see more levy banks go, and so that has an emotional effect on the market, but it won't be sustained as far as wheat's concerned.
He believes the weather damage will have little, if any, impact on world wheat prices.
For the short term, those sort of disasters always drag all prices along, but we will find that wheat will go back to the levels that it was finding in the marketplace anyway.
However, the association's newly elected Senior Vice President, Ian Donges, is more optimistic, saying the downgrading is likely to push up Australian wheat prices by at least $10 a tonne. As for Australia's wheat crop, it's forecast to reach 15 million tonnes, New South Wales contributing 4 million of that. However, Mr Condon warns to ensure these predictions are realised, more rain will be needed shortly.
Queensland, northern New South Wales will want some further rain in another month or 6 weeks, but it looks a hell of a lot better than it did 2 weeks ago.
The Farmers' Conference continues tomorrow. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
When Hunter Control won the contract to design and supply the computerised system to run the massive Pipawar mine in India 7 months ago, the company expected to finish the first phase in a year. But the $1 million control system is ready to be sent to Coal India well ahead of the November schedule.
We're looking at the culmination of a lot of hard work and midnight oil burning.
And the hard work isn't over yet. The company is spending 3 weeks cross-checking thousands of components with a manual as thick as a telephone book. Mr Duggan says with the mine in an isolated part of a developing country, that kind of rigorous approach is necessary.
This sort of explains the rigorous quality testing that we're doing on the system. We really can't afford to send over a product with any sort of faults in it.
Hunter Control hopes the work it's done for India will help show off this region's technology base.
All the ideas you see here today are homegrown and developed here in the Hunter Valley. What you see here is as good as anything in the world, we think.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Ian Streeter was cleaning up the backyard of this house in Edith Street, Waratah, when he found what he believed was an old army bomb. His first thought was for his 2-year-old son Dylan.
Oh, I used to have a door stopper just like it, but it was hollowed out and this one was solid, so I thought I'd better call the police and get them to have a look at it, save Dylan playing with it in the backyard.
Ian contacted police. They called in the scientific section, who in turn contacted an army technical officer from Denman in the Upper Hunter.
It's a very large bullet, you might say. It's been fired. There's no fuse in it, so the chances are that, it's inert, it's harmless.
A police officer was stationed outside the house during the afternoon, waiting for the technical officer to arrive. He'll check the device before taking it away for examination. Police, however, don't believe it poses a threat.
Some people may raise an eyebrow when you tell them you've spent a night in a police station. But for this group, it's par for the course. Their Duke of Edinburgh's course, that is. To obtain their Edinburgh Award, they must do a police service program. This involves 5 separate sessions learning how the police operate. Last night was their first session.
Everything that comes in here on the telephones or anything that goes over the air, it's all recorded. We've got a couple of the tape decks behind here. And by law, we have to keep those for 3 months.
In coming weeks, the group will learn about the role of detectives, intelligence and the water police. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Thousands of Australian soldiers fought in World War I on horseback. Their saddlepacks were essential for storing ammunition. It's a mystery where all the saddlebags went after the Great War. Many of them are probably buried in the deserts of the Middle East and other countries where the Allies fought. These saddlebags were also bound to be buried and lost forever, until rescued by David Pittman on a recent trip to an Upper Hunter farm.
A friend of mine's got, on the property I stay on, has got a few old belongings laying around the property, and I said to him, you should get some of this stuff out of the weather so it doesn't get wrecked. I took a couple of them home, chasing information, and I went straight to the library and looked for about 20 odd books to find the information, and then found good solid photos of these in World War I with the Light Horseman Brigade.
60 saddlebags in mint condition were saved by David. It's not known how the bags got onto his friend's Scone property. However, the town was a base for many of Australia's light horse regiments. David wants some of the bags to go to museums and World War I diggers. He plans to sell the rest. David, who's unemployed, has already sold one for $130 to a friend. He'll auction some this Sunday at Bulwarra.
Back over there, and these could be the last of the saddlebags left in Australia.
Best known of the 4 is former Mayor Ivan Welsh, now a restaurateur. Between 1987 and 91, Mr Welsh was the city's mayor and state member. Now he wants the job back. He's been actively involved in council matters and freely admits he enjoys stirring. Mr Welsh believes the most pressing problem for the city is Green Point. Unlike Mr Welsh, newcomer Stephen Katsigas has no previous local government experience. However, he's keen to learn and get involved. In his spare time, Mr Katsigas is a drummer in the rock band Raw Boar and says he enjoys riding his Harley Davidson and spending time with his family. He sees bad organisation and incompetence in council as the most pressing problems. Also new to local government is Warners Bay pastry cook Peter Craig. He's a sponsor of the Mount Hutton Rugby League Club and is interested in swimming, motor racing and watching his son play soccer. He believes the lake must be cleaned up and the council decision-making process improved. The youngest candidate is Richard Hill. He used to work in a library but is now unemployed. While he too has no local government experience, he says he discusses politics with every man and woman. He believes unemployment and the breakdown of infrastructure, communications and transport is a problem in Lake Macquarie.
Sean Cheng, master of Qigong, gathers the Qi, what he says is his inner life force. He transports it throughout his body. According to Chinese mythology, the Qi is the energy in all living objects. Gathered from the atmosphere, it has healing powers if handled correctly. Sean and wife Ramona, master of Chinese numerology, have come to Taree to present workshops on the healing powers of Qigong.
In practicing Qigong, the first thing, the basic thing is to learn to heal yourself properly. Then on a higher level, you learn how to send your extremely Qi out so that you can heal others.
Qigong has millions of followers in China and America and is gaining a small group of converts here on the North Coast. Local farmer John Irving is one believer.
I actually experienced the Qi force when Sean sent it through me, and it was the most extraordinary experience that I'd never experienced anything quite like it before, and I actually felt much, much better.
After 20 years of training in Chinese classics, ancient scripts, astronomy and astrology, Sean is also a master of Feng Shui, a method of using the Qi in architecture. Again, the idea is to harness natural energies. For example, Sean says this building is unsuccessful because the curved road around the building acts as a river, isolating it from the public. Apparently, the answer would be to plant 2 large trees out front in order to collect the Qi. Sean and Ramona will present workshops in Qigong and Feng Shui tomorrow.
This is Diana Middleby's interpretation of how Eve was created from Adam's rib. In fact, most of the Newcastle-based stories. Though the stories are centuries old, her perceptions of them are very modern.
None of them are using the stories in a blasphemous sort of way. I'm just using them as a point of reference, really. And
while Middleby's work is whimsical, Kim sombre. This is called The Mourning. It depicts a funeral and people fighting over the dead person's possessions. The Baked Fish captures the degradation of prostitution, not just of flesh, but of morals. Kim Wanless says she's not surprised that people often feel threatened by her work.
For them, it's too confronting to be faced with something that they don't usually want to look at, don't want to see, don't want to feel anything for.
The exhibition will open tonight at the Newcastle Region Art Gallery. Jane Anderson, NBN News.